The man they buried this week spent 4 decades teaching the world to fear one voice. His funeral answered a different question. What happens when that voice is gone, and the crowd it trained keeps chanting anyway? At the grave, the loudest calls were not for mourning. They were open calls for the killing of a foreign head of state. And within hours, that head of state, Trump, answered with a threat of his own, aimed straight back at Tehran. So the funeral did not close a chapter, it set a war footing. Here is the map for tonight. What those funeral chants actually tell us about who now controls the street. Why Trump's threat is pointed less at Tehran than at Washington. What the succession vacuum does to the regime's survival math. Where oil, sanctions, and the proxies fit on this board. And the one call we are putting on the record so you can hold us to it. Stay to the end, because the last move is the one nobody is pricing in. Start with the funeral, and read it as a status report, not as grief. A leadership that is genuinely confident does not need its mourners chanting for a foreign leader's death. It lets the state speak in its own measured voice. Chants for blood are what a movement reaches for when the man at the top can no longer supply legitimacy by simply existing. The crowd this week was not showing strength. It was rehearsing a role, because the script that used to come from a single author now has no author. The real contest is not Iran against America. It is inside Tehran, over who gets to hold the microphone the dead man left behind. And notice what a funeral is structurally. It is the one day a divided movement is allowed to look united, on camera, with the whole world watching. So every faction shows up to be seen. The question is never who mourns hardest. It is who the cameras frame at the front, who speaks, who is quietly left in the third row. This week the front row was loud, and the message was menace, and that tells you which faction currently owns the street. Owning the street is not the same as owning the state, but in a system that has just lost the man who balanced the two, the street is where the next leader will be auditioned first. Now turn to Washington, because Trump's threat is doing 2 jobs, and only one of them is about Iran. Follow the incentive. A president who is threatened at a rival's funeral is handed something rare in politics. A clean and unifying enemy, at 0 cost. The threat back is real, but its first audience is domestic. It converts a security insult into political capital. That is the tell. When a response costs the sender nothing and buys him everything at home, read it as leverage, not as a war plan. It does not mean nothing follows. It means the follow, if it comes, will be timed to a calendar we can watch, not to the heat of a graveside. Climb the ladder from the street to the structure. The Islamic Republic has always run on a simple survival math. Fear abroad buys cohesion at home. For 40 years, one man was the guarantor of that trade, the figure who could absorb a crisis and turn it into unity. Remove him, and the trade still runs, but now every faction can pull the fear lever on its own, for its own faction, with no referee. That is what the chants were, not a policy, an audition. The danger in a post-founder system is not that it collapses tomorrow. It is that it becomes many smaller Khameneis competing to prove they are the hardest, and hardness is the only currency a leaderless movement can still print. Name the players, because a vacuum is only frightening once you see who is standing around it. There is the security corps, the men who hold the guns and the missiles, and who believe the revolution is theirs to defend. There is the money, the networks that turned 4 decades of sanctions into private empires and who need the state stable enough to keep skimming it. There is the clergy, the formal source of legitimacy, now thinner and older than the founder generation. And there is the street, the crowd we just watched, which every one of the other 3 wants to claim. No single one of these can rule alone. The founders' whole function was to keep them from each other's throats. Take them away and each one starts testing how far it can push before another pushes back. That testing is the story of the next year, and it will leak outward as foreign policy. Snap this onto its historical twin, carefully, because the twin gives direction, not a date. When a long-ruling strongman dies and leaves no clean successor, the first year is rarely the coup and rarely the reform. It is the audition. Rival power centers, the security men, the money, the clergy, the street, all test how much they can take before someone stops them. The lesson of those transitions is not that the system falls, It is that the system's foreign policy gets more erratic before it gets more stable, because every actor is now performing for an internal audience. That is the window we are entering. Not the collapse that people have wrongly dated for years and that has not come, but the volatile audition that precedes any real turn. The pieces that make this a board and not a headline. Watch the oil first, because oil is where the regime's threats become priced. Every time Tehran wants the world to feel it, it reaches for the same lever: the shipping lanes of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, and the proxies that can choke them. Read a threat over that water not as a military plan, but as a sales pitch. The message to the market is always the same: we can still close this tap, and if you want us to keep it open, it will cost you at the table. Meanwhile, the Gulf states do the quiet opposite, locking in their own market share now, so that whenever Iranian crude returns, nobody depends on it. Every actor is trying to freeze the board in his own favor before Tehran can play its next hand. Then the proxies, because they are the part of the machine that keeps running even when the center is paralyzed. The axis was always designed so that Tehran could apply pressure without a return address. A group on one front, a group on another, each able to raise the temperature on command. In a succession fight, that network becomes something more dangerous, a set of levers that different factions can pull for their own domestic reasons. A faction that wants to prove it inherited the founder's spine does not need to win a war. It needs a flare, somewhere, that lets it stand up at home and say, "We acted." Watch for provocations that make no strategic sense abroad, but make perfect sense as an audition tape at home. Now the part nobody says out loud. A divided Iran is more dangerous abroad, not less. The comfortable assumption is that internal chaos makes a regime cautious. The opposite is true in a leaderless faction fight. When no one at home can claim the founder's authority, the cheapest way to claim it is a confrontation abroad that forces everyone to rally. The funeral chants were the first draft of that logic. The safest thing the region could hope for is a fast, boring succession. The thing it is more likely to get is a slow contest in which provocation is the campaign strategy. Grant the regime and its rivals agency here. They are not pawns. They are players who have just lost their referee. And hold one line steady through all of it, because it is the line the loudest voices blur. The fight is with the structure, the machine, the survival math that spends the Iranian people as fuel. It is not with those people, and it is not with a faith. The crowd that chanted this week is not the nation, and the nation that will inherit whatever comes next deserves better than to be flattened into the regime that rules it. Keep those two apart, always, because the day this system turns, it will turn on the strength of that distinction, not against it. Here is the misread almost everyone is about to make and why it will cost them. The headline says a strong man died, and the instinct is to file that under weakness, a wounded state, a good moment to press. That instinct is backwards. A wounded animal with a clear chain of command is predictable. A wounded animal whose pack is fighting over who leads is the one that lashes out without warning, because the lashing out is no longer about you, it is about the pack. So when you hear that Iran is weaker this month, translate it correctly. Weaker at governing itself, not weaker at reaching for a crisis, and in some ways far more willing to, because a crisis is now the fastest path to the top of a leaderless movement. The people who treat this as an opening to squeeze will be the ones surprised by the reaction, and they will call the reaction irrational. It will not be irrational. It will be a faction doing the one thing that pays right now, which is proving it is not afraid. Price that in before you price in the funeral. And keep your eye on the calendar. The regime cannot hide. The economy. Sanctions and oil are not a side story here. They are the clock. A movement auditioning for a new leader still has to pay its security corps, still has to keep the networks fed, still has to buy the streets quiet. That money has to come from somewhere, and the only large tap it controls is the same crude it keeps threatening to weaponize. So watch for the contradiction. Threats over the shipping lanes in one week, and quiet barrels moving out the next. That gap between the words and the barrels is the truest read of who is actually winning inside Tehran, because the faction that needs the cash will always sell, no matter how loud the funeral was. So here is the synthesis and then our call. Khamenei's death did not remove the threat. It removed the brake. The system he built now runs on autopilot toward hardness, because hardness is the only thing a movement without a founder can still agree on. Trump's threat, real as it is being spent as domestic capital on both sides of the water. And the oil lever is being loaded not for war, but for the negotiating table that everyone insists is dead. Our call, on the record, so you can score it. Watch the next 60 days for the audition, not the collapse. Expect the loudest provocations to come not from a unified Tehran, but from whichever faction most needs to prove it inherited the founder's spine. If a real move on the Persian Gulf shipping lanes comes, it will arrive wrapped as a demand, not a war. And the tell that the succession is turning serious will not be a speech. It will be who is standing next to whom at the next public appearance. Watch the room, not the microphone. That is the board tonight. The man is buried. The machine is not. And a machine with no author and no break is the most permissive environment this region has handed its adversaries in years. If this read holds up, you will see it here before the headlines do. If this map helped you see the week clearly, hit like and subscribe. It is free, and it tells us to keep drawing the board. The board moves every day. Subscribe and see the pieces before they move.